My name is Jim Ryan, and I'm the new instructional designer here at EWU. My job here is to take a look at the programs, courses, and people from a different point of view, to see how all these Lego pieces fit, and to imagine how I can help put them together differently to make something new and amazing. Welcome to the Play to Learn podcast. Today I am talking again with my good friend Katherine Tanski, where we discuss many of the ethical issues surrounding the topic of AI. The discussion spans from environmental impact, scraping plagiarism, to possible solutions. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. So hi, we're back again for part two.
Part two.
And this one, you teased me a little bit with some stuff that you've been learning about AI.
Yeah.
And about the ethical usage of AI, I might add.
Yeah.
So please indulge me because I'm all ears at this point.
Yeah. So there's two or three major ethical issues when it comes to AI. One is energy consumption, right? So we've had more and more studies that are coming out saying that the water issue, and just like any data processing center, the more queries you put in, the more water you use, we can't get that water back. It's having a negative impact on communities, et cetera, et cetera. Now, just like any other water conservation, corporations are far more guilty of this than individuals. However, if you are a person who carpools or takes a bike because you don't want to contribute to overall carbon emissions, this can be one of the ethical issues you face as you are looking at using AI. How frequently am I going to be contributing to this overall problem, even if my contribution is very small compared to the corporations who are doing this? So that's one ethical issue that comes up quite a bit. Ethical issue number two specifically deals with artwork. And you know that this is very near and dear to my heart because I have artists who have had their art scraped, have written about it, and have lost money and have had financial damage due to AI. And understandably, that is a concern for me personally and for other people who, even if they're not artists, this idea that there could be damage to people is something that not everybody is aware of. You know, AI appeared, and at first there was a lot of fun little filter type pics, right? Like turn your picture into an avatar, and that was kind of like how it started. And now it generates something fully from scratch, but it's like it's not coming from scratch. And put it in the style of this, and it's like, okay, but that person didn't give permission for their style to be used. So rather than exploring creatively, people are also, again, corporations are far more guilty of this than individuals, paying AI rather than paying the person,
right,
in order to draw something that they imagine. And so that is sort of ethical issue number two in using AI artwork. Ethical issue number three, as a writing person, this is also where we come into the question of the texts that were scraped and fed into machines, again, not used with permission. OpenAI and those companies were like, let's just go on the internet and take everything that we can possibly find and feed it into it. And it's not even asking forgiveness than permission. It's like, well, you can't stop us. We did it already. So we shouldn't be guilty of it because look at this wonderful thing that we put into the world. And I'm very much like the ends justify the means is kind of like their attitude. But that doesn't stop, again, the crime that was taking place. It doesn't stop the irreparable harm that things have done towards individual people's jobs, and also just the continued misinformation. Every time a lawyer uses ChatGPT to create a legal brief and does it incorrectly, that's harm done on the system. Every time a Chicago book review asks you for top 10 summer reads and invents fake books by authors that are actually existing, and this gets put out in the real Chicago Tribune because the person who was in charge of quote unquote writing it didn't fact check what AI gave it. Again, this is like irreparable harm. It doesn't just tarnish the reputation of people. It doesn't just tarnish the reputation of AI. It makes our society filled with disinformation. And this is, again, an issue that using AI indiscriminately or using it because you think it's a shortcut is not what I consider to be a smart, critical, ethical usage of AI. So that's where we're starting from, of me being like, the way that I see AI being used and the way it was created causes a huge ethical dilemma for me personally and for a lot of people that I know. not just faculty and people who are mindful, but there have been people ringing bells about this for a while.
Sure.
So
now I agree with you on
Yeah.
the majority of the stuff that you're saying. There's a few points that I want to play devil's advocate on, just because I want people to hear the arguments that are being made for that. And I know you already have the answers to. Well, because I know you researched this because you're just like me. So the first one, point one regarding energy usage, 100% on. When you're talking about corporate AI services, there are massive issues when it comes to energy needs. Graphics cards, I mean, you're talking about they're up to 1,000 watts per at this point. And you're talking about server farms of tens of thousands of computers, if not millions of these computers. So there's a lot of power issues and how to ethically source that power. And the interesting thing about that is there are a number of companies, one that I actually follow called Iris Energy, and they originally were a Bitcoin, they still are a Bitcoin mining company. However, they have based their business model around ethically, I guess we could say, creating and harvesting energy that is beneficial. So, for example, one thing they'll do is one of the number one sources of methane in the United States, aside from swamps, is landfills. So what they will do, and a lot of these landfills are not necessarily connected up to the grid. So any kind of methane burning that they will do on site, it will get rid of the methane. It'll still create some greenhouse gases. But the main point is to get rid of the methane, because methane is a major contributor to greenhouse gases. So what they'll do is they will take some containers of their stacks and go to those places. And because it would normally take millions of dollars to run that energy to the grid, and it's just getting burned off, so they'll use that energy there to source that energy and do their mining there. And so that really helps as far as that concern. Again, this is not the majority of companies, but some companies have been pioneering these ways to say, oh, okay, here's where there's an energy source that's being wasted. It's just going to nothing. And that's doing more harm than if it was providing a service for people. And that's the kind of thing I like. But again, the majority, and I'd like to hear more about the water issue thing. But the other way that I generally promote is what I call organic homegrown AI, because a lot of people don't know that you can actually host a lot of these AI services right on your own computer, and you can have your own computer doing that work for you. Now, there's a caveat with that, and that if you want to get the same results with the same speed, you will need to have a graphics card that's capable of doing those computations. But instead of using massive server farms that are using megawatts, if not gigawatts worth of power, you're using 200 to 500, maybe 1,000 watts max for a short period of time. So that really mediates the amount of power usage is being put in, and it makes you the source, and it's not putting your load on the rest of the grid as much. But please, I really want to hear about this water usage, because that's another thing that's I also find very fascinating.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, to your point, I love learning that the companies that are innovating are seeing that green energy and sustainability could be a reason to promote green energy to support the AI stuff that's coming out here and the servers and all that kinds of stuff. I've seen other things around about solar panels and like flat wind power, because water is still the main issue, right? Water cannot really be created so much, especially where they're located in the processes that they're using right now. Right. So it's really like, yes, I just saw a thing about like getting water out of nothing in the desert, or like a new window MIT created to like create water, right? So yes.
Watching the same thing is like daily. It's great.
Yes, I know. It's coming, but it's not there. Yeah. So like the current infrastructure that's there is not water friendly, especially because they are often building these server farms in remote desert locations. I know that there was going to be some in Eastern Washington too, that Amazon we're going to build some data centers here in Eastern Washington. I don't know if that got canceled or not, but that was definitely something that I saw and I was like, oh, there's a lot of farming here and a lot of agriculture, and water is a very, I don't want to say sticky issue, but like it's something that the community is invested in. Like,
yeah, in Eastern Washington especially, there are drought issues.
Right.
Sure. So are they using the water for cooling? Is that what the issue is?
That's the main cooling. And you can go look up the recent studies, but I think that the one that came out was essentially every query, this was how they tried to express it, every query cost a bottle of water, a 16.9 ounce regular standard bottle of water for every single query that is created. And that water, because of the process, is not like recaptured in steam or condensation and reused. Just because the speed at which these processes are happening and the largest of the facilities and the way the facilities are built, water is just being lost. It's being expended. And we've seen this in non-AI context. Zuckerberg has a big lawsuit out because of the way his meta facilities are affecting the neighborhoods that he built in the water there. Look up Hawaii and Zuckerberg's water rights, right? So we know that like there's an issue.
Let's talk about Nestle. That's
Right, let's not talk about Nestle too, but like the people in California who own all the water privately. But that's the major issue, is that water is already something there. So contributing to that, again, corporations they're the most guilty. Amazon, the ones who are doing it, Microsoft doing it internally themselves on this like the level. But, that is something that people are starting to hear more about, is like, okay, so I like using AI. The way that AI energy and these things are set up are generally not sustainable and are causing environmental harm and impact to communities. So what do I do? I love this idea of like DIY kind of thing. It's not financially or technologically available to everyone.
Sure.
But I do like that is also an option that you can suggest to people who especially might be interested, people who make their own GPTs and things like that already, to going that next level and creating their own sort of responsibly created. Maybe they have a little solar power thing in their house that helps generate energy to help feed it, like setting up their own closed systems. I like that idea.
Yeah. And actually, now that you're explaining how it works, God, this is so ironic, because a good friend of mine who I've shown you these ideas for these pumps and turbines that I've been making. Well, he's the one who's been kind of the inspiration for me because of his system, because it specifically uses this thing called cold steam. Have you ever heard of this before? You've heard cold steam.
Yeah.
Oh God, now we're going to have fun. So he has this giant water tank that he pulls a vacuum on. So he gets the boiling point down to about 130 degrees, which for water is really low. So if you are getting a heat source, like say from all these GPUs that are churning, using it to heat this water tank and produce steam, then that steam goes to his turbine. The turbine, and while that water is heating up the tank of water, it's transferring that heat. So it's not being wasted. It's actually cooling off and can be recirculated back into the server farms. So then that heat that's generated turns the steam turbine and then generates more power. So you're using that waste heat and that waste water. You're able to keep the water and you're able to generate energy from the waste heat. And people say over Unity, yeah, this is not gonna break the laws of physics. There is loss. They're not going to be making more power than they're spending, but they will be able to keep more of those resources.
That's important.
Yeah.
Every little bit counts right now.
Yeah. There's all these ways that we can be more efficient with energy. And that's something I've been obsessed with for such a long time, just trying to figure out ways, because it's so interesting. Because there is energy all around us. We just don't know how to organize it.
Well, and then there's also the problem of the corporations who own the way that the energy is currently done. Like, just look at gas, right? Gasoline, electric cars, all this stuff, like even way before Tesla. And I remember in the 90s, one of my science teachers telling me about how somebody had invented essentially a car that would take in, or like an engine that would take in carbon dioxide, methane, all the bad gases that are in our system and basically put out water. And GM bought his idea and then sat on it because, right, they didn't want to actually implement it. They wanted to just keep that from going anywhere else. But now I've seen something about that. Like I've seen an engine that they're promoting, that they're working on as doing basically that same thing. I'm like, is that the same guy? Like I have to wonder if that was the idea that they were sitting on for so long, that now it's culturally interesting to have an alternative. So,
Well, it's not just that. I think it's also the fact that because back in the day, and you're talking about the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there wasn't an internet.
Right.
There wasn't so much widespread sharing of information. So when somebody had an idea, it was very easy to capture that idea and hold it captive.
Yes.
But now with the internet and so many different sources being available, I mean, you can scour YouTube and go down these rabbit holes and find all these lost ideas and then spread it far and wide, and somebody will pick it up and run with it.
Yeah.
You know,
that's part of the great thing about entrepreneur and startup culture that we're seeing. Like you were talking back to that, like it used to be a Bitcoin miner, probably still is. And then they were like, hey, well, what if we also captured this and get investors who are supportive of this idea? We're solving two problems. And so we're seeing a lot of that too. This like idea of sustainability minded entrepreneurship and business acumen. And we're seeing the positive response to that because consumers respond well to that now. It's a top priority for a lot of consumers to get things that do not actively harm the environment.
but it also makes it cheaper.
Yeah.
Too.
And that's the best part, right? Like that's win-win when we can have, like I said, a green energy boom plus AI supporting that. If we could get Microsoft, all those big companies on board to converting to that kind of energy, like that would be a great thing.
Yeah. Some companies like Microsoft might be less.
That's like being.
Aren't they building their own new? And I'm in favor of nuclear power as long as it's done right.
Yeah.
But I think they're building their own nuclear plant.
I did hear that, but also, so I have a really good friend who lives in Canada, and I don't know if you know this, but most of the energy in like the northeast part of Canada is all nuclear and has been for decades. Jimmy Carter, former President Jimmy Carter, actually one of his things was he went to Canada and stopped like a nuclear meltdown when he was like a young Army Corps of Engineers guy or something like that, because they've been doing nuclear power small, controlled for so long. So like the safety when it comes to nuclear power, the way it is done today, they're smaller, they're safer. So, but in the United States, we still have a lot of like,
Yeah, everybody watches The Simpsons and sees the little three-eyed fish and the little green. I don't even know what that's supposed to be because Uranus thing is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's 2025. Like they've had, and they've had nuclear reactors floating around in the oceans for the last 60 years. I think they figured out how to do it safe.
Right. But yeah, there's still that cultural thing of like, nuclear energy. I live now on the west side past Olympia, and Olympia is National Forest. And so there's this location, I think it's called Sapsot, where there was nuclear energy planned. And so as you're driving out the 101 towards the coast, you see these two huge stacks there, and you're like, I'm suddenly in Chernobyl, because it looks like there's just trees under these two nuclear cooling reactors, right? The county or whatever the organization has turned it into a little shopping center or business center or something like that. So they were never made active.
Yeah.
Because people had protested so much. But they're still sitting there. And so now like film crews come out and film there when they need to do it. And so it's just interesting to see how this remnant of like nuclear panic is sort of being used in a new way.
Is that where they filmed that one X-Men with the weird Deadpool?
I don't know. It could be. If they were in Vancouver for filming and then came down to Washington, that's probably where
they probably did that, I bet. Okay, so here are the points where I'm going to play devil's advocate with when it comes to artwork and text and skimming that stuff. So a lot of, and I'm not going to say like AI learns because it's not sentient, but it is able to conglomerate patterns and make predictions based on those patterns. But it also is very similar to the way we humans act and learn. And so one could make the argument that, say somebody grew up reading all these different types of comic books and was fascinated by all these different styles of comic book artists and their styles. Mm-hmm. Over time, that person develops their own style of making their own artwork, and they pull from those different visual examples that they saw growing up or their current media or whatever. And so they create their own comic book or their own illustration or piece of artwork or text. I guess we could also pull that one in. But they're also pulling from all these different things they have seen in their past. And so what makes the difference between what a person would create based on their own skill, intuition, and experience versus what an AI would make by combing through the web and what other publicly available information is able to see there?
Money. Okay. Because you go to the library and you check out books, and those books cost money to print, and the author or the artist gets money from that thing that you looked at. If you are looking at things that were essentially pirated, like I always compared it to, it's not entirely Napster or like the Pirate Bay or anything like that, but it's definitely, I don't understand how people can crack down on pirating TV shows, movies, games as stealing, correctly so, money from the people who put in that, who created that, and not condemn AI who didn't compensate financially anybody that it stole things from. So those artists didn't get compensated in any way. Those authors didn't get compensated in any way. And they were not ethical in only doing public domain or creative commons licensed material. So that's basically it. Like, we're talking about, if you want to talk about ethics in a capitalistic society, you stole things and did not compensate the people who created it. You did not compensate the humans who created this, the publishers who created this, the typesetters. There's an industry around creative work, and there are processes in place. For comics, for example, you have essentially a line artist, and then you have often a flatter and a colorist. So like some people do it all in one, kind of like how someone can do like a director of photography and writer, editor, all kind of stuff. But there's like 6 or 7 or sometimes 8 or 9 or 10 people involved in the process of creating a comic book. Every one of those people gets paid for their contribution. When you have AI make something that was based on the work of these 10 people who do not get compensated, you are directly impacting their livelihoods and putting their jobs at risk. So that's basically it.
And that's perfect. And that's one of the messages I want to get out, in that there is that point. And the thing that's going to be making people question their usage of AI is, where's the line? Where is it okay for the individual versus the corporation? And is the individual actually stealing if they're using either a model that they're using from a subscription service, or if they're doing it from their own computer, or where are they actually getting into trouble, and what should they be pushing towards?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about Adobe. Okay. So Adobe Stock Images, I have a subscription to it through my institution, right? They had AI art that's there. Okay. So Adobe gets paid for AI art that was built off of the work of others. And so you are paying Adobe to look at these models of AI, right? So again, like, why does the corporation get paid for art that was AI? And the person who potentially inspired that AI artwork doesn't get paid for it. So that's kind of one thing. I think when it comes to deciding, again, individual usage versus corporate usage and the stuff that's out there, we can continue to ring the bell of alarm and support the lawsuits of the artists and the authors who are suing OpenAI and these other companies for essentially damages. I think that's where we're going to have to go, because again, we can't unmake what has been made. We cannot unmake Midjourney or these other places that have been created based on art that was scraped. Unlike Napster, we're not going to be able to shut it down because of copyright infringement, I don't think. I would love that to happen because, again, Napster went away. Lots of torrent places went away in the United States. So apparently we're okay to do that on behalf of corporations, but when it's individuals who are affected, no. The only thing we can do is support the lawsuits and raise their voices and tell their stories. And then that will, again, hopefully caution people just to think about the effort. And, you know, me personally, I am trying to promote hiring artists and hiring creators to do this work. You like this style of artwork? Why don't you commission an artist to do that? They exist. And promoting that as well as an alternative, because I do think access is one of the main things that people are turning to AI to do, right? Like, I don't have access to an artist. I don't know a database where I can look up an artist who will give me what I want. So if we could create more places where people can contact artists, I think people will, who are struggling with this issue, support your local artist, support your local writer in order to, again, not be force, or I don't want to say, not feel like that's their only option, is to contribute to a system that systemically takes wages from people. Like, how do I do that? Well, support the people that the wages were stolen from, that the copyright was infringed upon, and look for ways to be part of that artist community or local community. We do that. You see that all the time with like food. Like, support your local farm, support your local, like, they have co-ops, right? Like, I get my vegetables straight from my neighbors, or I go to the farmer's market and things like that. So I think if we turn that community mindset towards artists and writers, that would be a nice alternative counter movement.
That's an excellent point. So another pushback, and this is kind of also from personal reasons, because one of the major attractive points about the usage of AI is it acts as a force multiplier for an individual. So it allows you to accomplish so many more things that you would normally take far longer to do by yourself. And so then the question becomes, well, I'd like that. I like being able to do more because it makes me a more effective worker. It helps me accomplish more. So why would I want to change that if the AI allows me to do this?
So this is the part where we get where Kate likes AI. Okay.
Oh, there.
So one of the things, and this is actually related to the Pacific Northwest, Worldcon, okay, is going to be in Seattle this year. It's the biggest science fiction fantasy convention in the world. It's called Worldcon for a reason. And they came under fire because they used AI to help create their panels and their programming for the year. And they came under fire because they were extremely transparent that they did this. And they said, here's our statement on how we use AI. We got 5,000 panel submissions. And then rather than force our volunteers to go through all of this, unpaid volunteers, right, to spend all the time researching and checking and looking for patterns of what panels could, and, you know, what submissions could potentially go together, what kind of schedule that would look like. We employed AI to cut down on, you know, fraudulent submissions, to provide what they thought were thematic things. And then they had the volunteers look at it and confirm and fact check and finalize the schedule from there. But the point was that it saved them a lot of time to not have to do that and made that system much better, fewer time. I don't know if anyone, I feel like the people who complained have never done that kind of data entry and analysis before because it is mind-numbing. And it would be so much nicer to just focus on, okay, these are the ones that go together, right? So no one was cut as a panel because AI said so. That was the other thing that they were very clear on, that nobody was cut. We basically just looked at the options that were there, made our own decisions as humans based on these options that we were given. I think that's a great usage of AI. I think, again, you're maximizing human effort and what humans are good at, and laying off the work of things that honestly are like beneath most humans that we don't want to spend all our time doing. We would rather be doing more interesting things onto a machine. I think that's great. Another thing that I like about AI is its ability to provide inspiration and invention. So I'm a rhetorician by trade. Okay, I was trained as a rhetorician. Invention or inventorio is one of the 5 canons of rhetoric. Okay, it's one that has been studied a lot in my field of rhetoric and writing. How do you create inspiration? How do you inspire people? How do you invent new things? That has always been a problem, 2,000 years, or longer, creating something from nothing. There are very few brand new ideas. We're always building off of somebody else's ideas. And we're not talking about like good artists copy, great artists steal kind of stuff, but we're really talking about looking at something and wanting to make it better or making it feel more like you. And so I think, and for a lot of things that you are not an expert in, I work with faculty. Learning objectives are a great example. Okay. Like nobody likes writing learning objectives. I don't know anybody who does that. And coming up with what is going to align with your program or like what is reflective of your work, it's just difficult things that they weren't trained in per se. ASU has a great learning objectives model that is an ethically self-contained ChatGPT-4 from OpenAI. So it does not feed your data back into the ChatGPT-4 system. It's a closed system that they did. And they have a great learning objectives generator. So you can say, like, here's the level of things that I want. Here's the keywords I'm looking at. And here's some of my concepts and topics. And here's my field. And it will provide examples of this because, as you said, essentially, it's regurgitating things that it's seen before. And that's fine. I think we need to just maintain that that's what it does. It regurgitates things that it's seen before, and it tries to fit the data that it's seeing with these little packages of information. And then the human part is to edit and analyze and see, customize it, make it your own. So again, I think that is a perfectly ethical use of it to make yourself more efficient, spend less time writing and sweating over learning objectives, more time doing the things that you already are not paid enough for as a faculty member. I'm about to go to InstructureCon, and there's going to be a lot of things about AI agents who can do all the grading for you, who can answer student questions 24/7. I think a lot of that's a pipe dream. I think a lot of that is a little bit of like, wouldn't it be great if there was no human contact with students whatsoever?
No. No.
Right. That's the part where it's like, okay, but also like there's this thing called regular and substantive interaction, or RSI, which is the basis of financial aid being given to institutions, where you have to prove that you as a human being exist in online courses. So that you're getting some conflicting messages there. But again, I think anything that is going to make a person more efficient and like less stressed as a starting point when it comes to invention or inventing ideas is a good critical usage of AI. I was just talking with some people in computer science for this other project I'm working on about how they're using AI and how it aligns with their kind of culture of, if you are starting from a blank screen, you're already doing it wrong. And it's not because they think that everybody should steal everything. They're really coming from this idea of free ideas. Everything should be free. No, they basically kind of are, they don't really think that copyright should exist, at least when it comes to code, right? Basically, like, if you have an idea, then it should be, this is a thing like GitHub, right? Like, go and start. Like, why do I have to build this thing when it already exists? It's very much like a don't reinvent the wheel kind of culture. And so the way that they're using AI is very similar to that. And they're using, by having AI create code and then having the students debug that code and point out all the problems and then feeding that back into the AI system, they are also improving AI's ability to be helpful to people. Again, I think that's kind of something that you can say is a more ethical usage and is a good way to teach people critical thinking skills. And that's kind of where we can end up, is the idea that we want people to not be passive. We want people to be thoughtful, not just in like whether or not to use AI, but in how they're using AI and what AI is good at. And again, like making yourself more efficient. I have a colleague who loves using AI to streamline workflows, personal workflows. She's got a side hustle with like an Etsy store and things like that. And if she can have AI create the orders and things like that based on coming in and sort of automate that in a good way for her, like, great. Absolutely. That is what AI is good at. Humans are always going to be better at critical thinking. Humans are always going to be better at creativity in general. But yet creating that ability to be better at your job or not have to have the tyranny of the blank screen or something like that, I think is a place where I'm willing to meet AI.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. There's always going to be this conflict, and people are usually conflict averse. They want to avoid it as much as possible. But having that conflict also helps us better define where things should be. And it doesn't matter how much the two parties bang heads, there's still an air gap in there when they pull their heads apart for the next one. Maybe it's a little bit less forceful. And then at some point they're like, well, okay, we can be at this spot. And I think we're still a long way from understanding how AI is really going to integrate into society, because it is this entirely brand new thing that humanity's never seen before. And it's going to be a very complex relationship, but I think as long as we're doing our best, we're going to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is also, it's just a tension, and we don't know. We've never encountered this as a species before, as you said. We have had similar technologies, like I said, with the like pirating of videos and BitTorrent and stuff like that when that came out. I also, as a writing instructor, like to bring up Wikipedia. When Wikipedia and the internet became a thing, every writing instructor was like, "Do not quote from Wikipedia. Just go to the sources." And we still say that. We still say, okay, Wikipedia is not trustworthy in the same way that AI is not trustworthy. But again, if you're going to Wikipedia, it is community monitored, right? People have to say what changes they're making and why. Other users can go in and comment on those changes and make things more correct. And everything needs to be cited with sources. So that's actually a good practice for writers, and especially community writers. Like, you could do worse than assign your students to create Wikipedia articles. And I know lots of teachers who have actually done that in order to better help communities writing about women's contributions in STEM or something like that, and just creating more articles, right? But when it first came out, everyone was like, no, bad internet kind of thing. So they have that knee-jerk reaction, and now we've come to see it as a good thing in the world, creating access and equity and being able to promote something, your niche specialty that you're really interested in. There's nothing preventing you from going to Cold Steam on Wikipedia and linking out to YouTube videos to people who are doing that stuff, right? So we will see where we land. But as you said, like, having these conversations and just acknowledging the tension and the conflict between them, and acknowledging that there's no resolution for them, but there are options, I think is where we need to be right now.
Man, this was so awesome. I know. So you teased me last time with AI, so you don't have to tease me now, but I know that you got something already in mind for the next time we talk.
I mean, I think one thing, and we talked about it briefly before I even started talking about this, is the idea of like bespoke course design. And so bespoke tailoring was it's like Savile Row and these specially designed suits and things that are tailored for the person that are kind of unique, right? So bespoke fashion. Course design, when people started churning out so many courses, they wanted them all to look the same. And there's definitely some value in that, in the same way that there's value of mass-produced suits and clothing that are out there that gives people the opportunity to get something right away. They don't have to put too much work because this is going to look good off the rep. It's going to be fine. And there's the idea with students and cognitive load and branding and wanting brand recognition. Like, this is what a University of Phoenix course looks like. This is what an Oregon State eCampus course looks like. There's a continuity of brand and imaging and things like that. And I think that's great. And you can keep that brand identity or continuity when it comes and student cognitive load and things like that, but also tailor the course to the teacher and the way that they teach. I think when I talk to a lot of teachers who are teaching online for the first time, they're like, but that's not how I teach. And I'm like, then you haven't had the right course designer, because they should not be telling you to teach this way. They should be building the course around the way that you teach. So,
well, let's not give it too much of it away.
Yeah.
Let's save it for the next time. But yeah. God dang it, it's just so awesome to be able to see you in person. And I hope it happens sooner rather than later, but we can always meet on Zoom and all that stuff. Thanks for being here, and we'll call this one a wrap.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.